Welcome to Your Point, My View, a conversational podcast where every viewpoint matters. My name is Bobby, and with me I have my lovely co-hosts, Felisa and Tanya.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, so as you all know, the month of May is focusing on mental health, mental awareness, and it's very, very important and very, very vital in today's society. So that's what our podcast is going to be about today. Now, before we jump in too deep, because I know we have some specifics that we want to dive into, um, I want to try to talk about mental health and mental illness. Now, a lot of people they interchange the two, and so I wanted to get your opinions first, ladies. What is the difference, to your knowledge, between mental health and mental illness? What's the difference?
Well, for me, mental health is something that everybody has because it's part of who you are. It makes up your emotional and your social well-being and how you feel psychologically and mentally. Mental illness to me is a diagnosis, something that you are diagnosed with, you have. So, and not everybody has that. So that's the main difference because the illness alters that part of you, your thinking and your feelings and your moods and your behaviors. And that doesn't happen to everybody. So that's the distinction that I make. And that's what I've looked up and found.
Specifically, when you're talking about mental illness, I want you to think of it like this: it's a health challenge, it's a health condition that requires in some cases might require intervention, medical intervention. It affects significant patterns in somebody's thinking and how they feel and then their behaviors. It can cause distress and it can impair how a person functions on a day-to-day basis. When you think about mental health, I want you to think about wellness. What do I need to do to reduce any types of stressors? And what do I need to do to add coping skills to deal with life on life terms? And so when you think about like Lisa said, mental health, it happens to everybody. How everybody deals with day-to-day life struggles. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, someone with mental illness, though, still has to focus on their mental health to maintain their stability. So, for instance, stressors for them with a mental illness might be even more intense. And so they really, really need to focus on a regimen that's healthy for their diagnosis and what they have. And that's what we call a treatment plan. So those are some of the things that, everybody has mental health, just like everybody has physical health. You want your
Right.
physical health to be good. You got to eat right, eat your vegetables. You want your mental health to be good. That means you go for walks, you relax, you stress, you have some mindfulness thinking. So, yoga, whatever you need to do to relax or relate and release. Okay.
Okay,
You know
all
what? When
right,
you
I
say
like
healthy,
that.
when people too think, you mentioned something there with the healthy eating, and a lot of people don't associate mental health as with healthy eating as well. They think of that.
Yeah.
I mean, or that keeping your mind sharp and keeping a healthy brain.
Uh-huh.
Part of that, and I didn't know this until I got older and started trying to take care of myself more, is what you eat affects your mindset as well.
Yes.
And so that it's a holistic approach to that mental health and getting healthy and boundaries. I found boundaries is so vital to your stability and being able to maintain mental health. When you have those boundaries, you protect your peace at all costs. And that's part of that wellness plan. So it's a holistic kind of approach that you have to take to maintain, in from my experience, my mental health.
That's a great point, Lisa. And you're right. It is physical. Like I know when I work with clients, before I see them and get a diagnosis, one of the things I do is I do a sleep diary because I want to see how is my client sleeping. Because if they're not sleeping well, then we got a problem. Either it's a physical problem that they're not sleeping or it is a mental problem. And I need to rule out the physical aspect because that's going to make the decision on my approach on how I treat them. So it's important, when you talk about physical aspects, they do go hand in hand. Like I tell my clients, they kind of go hand in hand. We have to look at both pictures because your mental health is your physical health, and that's a great point, Lisa. Because you're right, food has a factor. Your boundaries, who you interact with, it could be environment. You know how environment can cause mental health issues too. If you're in a toxic environment, it could be stuff that is in the air that could be affect. It could be a lot of different things. We just have to be mindful
Your
that can affect
workplace.
our, yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
Your
thanks.
a
workplace could be
toxic
we spend
workplace, and
we
that's
spend a lot of hours there and we breathe in those toxins, right? Whether
right.
it's the
Yeah.
people or the
People,
environment.
and
Yeah.
we used to have me and my coworkers at the time. I don't know if I mentioned this on another podcast, but you know how the supervisor would walk in a room and we'd be like, "Is it a sunny day, or is it a rainy day, or is it a storm, or is it a winter storm?" And we would talk about how the atmosphere would change when that person enters the room. So that's important to note. You're right, boundaries, and then how other people might rub you the wrong way, and it changes things in your atmosphere. So environment is key too for mental health.
These are all really, really good points. And thanks, ladies, for sharing. So I guess to summarize, mental health is just like it would be like physical health, like Felicia brought up. It's about your overall well being, correct? Whereas mental illness is specified, and there are certain conditions that maybe would disrupt that well being, right? Because you can have a person with poor mental health without a diagnosis, right? Or you can have someone that's diagnosed with something, but still experience several periods of good mental health, right?
Right.
Okay, cool, cool. So now what I would like to do is kind of turn over to you, Tanya, because there are certain questionnaires that are out there for us to gauge where we are mentally, which I actually like. It kind of gives us a self-study, so to speak, and it gives us that knowledge that we need to either pivot or to keep doing what we're doing to make sure that our mental health is regulated, or it gives us the opportunity to, I guess, have a prerequisite for a possible diagnosis, or something tangible for us to take to an experienced specialist and say, "Hey, I took this self study test, and this is what I have." Help. So let's jump into that and let's see how that tailors to mental health.
Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the screening tools that I had you guys complete. It was the ACEs study and the resiliency scale. The ACEs study is basically adverse childhood experiences. This actual screening came out of some research that was done in Kaiser Permanente about they were looking at health aspects, and they were looking at the fact that individuals who had early childhood experiences tend to experience more health related factors based upon their ACEs score. Now, this is the screening that I had to do wasn't the quite ACE test that the study was done on. This ACE test has to do specifically more a little bit with family dynamics, which was one of the reasons why I selected it. But for just that regular ACEs score, a lot of research was put into it, because if we can mitigate those factors at an early age and provide protection, which is additional activities to help, then we can offset, the potentiality for mental health issues or challenges when you become an adult. And then if someone is diagnosed with a mental illness, they're at higher risk if they have these adverse childhood experiences early in their childhood. So it really helps us look at that in their life trajectory. So the research has said that if I have someone who has an A score of like over 4 or 5, they're at higher risk for other health related issues down the line. So that's just important to note. So we did
Hey T, can
um
I ask you something?
go
That the
right ahead.
listeners might. So with that ACE score, okay, so you're saying that some of the ACE score is correlate a direct correlation is the environment that the child grew up in. Did I
Correct.
understand that? So
Yes.
can some okay, and then someone who has a ACE score um that shows that they were in a
A
what are they?
toxic environment or environment that was unhealthy in childhood.
Well, can someone who had a healthy childhood have a bad ACE score, or it's bad the word, but
Well, I don't think you wanna say it as good or bad, okay? For our listeners, you don't wanna say it as good or bad because we've
higher
experienced,
than higher
yeah,
low?
a
Okay,
higher, yeah.
okay,
Some individuals have experienced more, trauma, than others. So or more adverse experiences. But if you have it's almost like a teeter-totter. If you have adverse experiences and then you have positive experiences, that can offset
okay,
a adverse experience. So for the child who basically has resiliency skills, like who has made we did our resiliency skills and it was 14 questionnaires of what positive aspects you had in childhood. If you have a 14 and somebody has a 5, that mitigates that effect on that child. So for instance, you want to build resiliency uh attributes for a child at that age who has experienced, adverse childhood experiences like poverty, you know, social determinants of health were factors that are attributed to lack of transportation. It could be domestic violence in the home. It could be not having enough food to eat. Those are adverse childhood experiences. But if I'm involved in activities at school that are healthy, or if I have someone that's a caring person that's in my life, a mentor that provides me with food and a safe place to stay to talk about these things, that buffers the effect of that. And so what we want to do is to build a youth's resiliency factor so that they can, you know, bounce back if something happens,
okay,
if
so
that
it's not
makes sense.
it does. It's because when I think of childhood trauma, I think of the big ones,
Mhm.
domestic violence, homelessness. You think of the well, I think in my mind immediately goes to the big ones. But you just mentioned one, and I heard lack of transportation. So the child is stressed on, can't get to school or can't get to and from school, get to activities, school activities.
Yeah.
And so they can't participate in school activities, and that adversely affects them mentally.
Or
So,
even one thing was not having enough clothes to wear to school.
yeah,
Having one or two
outfits.
outfits.
Okay, okay.
I mean,
Hmm.
that could be because they might get bullied or teased at school,
Oh,
So it could be just little stuff like that that has an effect that where they don't have a good peer connection. It can be something small, but what it is like cuz when we did this adverse childhood experience, how did that affect that person? You know, because did it make an effect on them growing up? Because it might not have had an effect.
okay.
And so that's because of that resiliency factor. And then understand that the brain is a beautiful thing for children and for adults too. If they've experienced something, part of that will come and that brain might shut down so that you can kind of get through it. And then when you're in a safe environment later on in adult, it might come back up. I've worked with
Yeah.
plenty of clients that, they have flashbacks or PTSD where they have those symptoms that happen to them that are repressed and they don't come up until they're in a safe environment later on. And then they're able to maturely process them. So the brain, like I said, is a beautiful thing. If you study it, it's phenomenal. The neuroscience of what we're looking at now is just it's beautiful. And even with clients who have mental health challenges, the brain is a beautiful thing to learn and for them to add different ways to cope. And that's why medication is important. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah.
Okay.
But for us, we did our scores. I'll share my score. My A score was 4 and my resiliency score was 14. So I had a lot of aspects of resiliency in my family unit that kind of protected me from the things that kind of happened that I experienced in childhood. Right now as an adult, my resiliency score dropped a little bit to like 12 because I think I'm a type of person, well, being a therapist, I'm always pouring out and I have to really really work hard to make sure that I have protections in place that I can provide that self-care for myself, because as a child you depend on that self-care sometimes from that caregiver. And when that caregiver, as you get older, isn't there, then you have to start to implement factors that make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So I think that's important. So I don't know if you guys wanted to share your scores and what you learned from doing the screening.
I really still don't know what I know I took it, but I really don't know what it means. It's like, because I answered how you just go to the doctor's office and you just read the question, you
Yep.
answer, and you check it off, and you really, at the end of the day, it's like, I got more yeses than no's, or more no mo's, no more no's than yeses. But the ACE score was a 1.
That's
So
good, at least.
yes,
That's really good.
and so I guess that means that during growing up during the first 18 years of my life, I didn't really have that many adverse things that impacted me, or
Hmm.
that impacted me in such a way where it lasted, or it stayed with me. Now, at my the resilience score, it says how many did I have as a child and youth was 12. So that was my resilience score. And then how many do I still have today? 12. So I haven't made I haven't changed any. I don't know if
That's
that's good or
good.
bad.
That's right.
But no, that's really good. And that um and you and that speaks to the fact that you had a healthy way of self-care that began in early childhood. So that's a strength that you have, and
Mhm.
something that you have the ability to share and pass on to other people, but also for yourself. And which, just in knowing you, I see it. You've always kind of had that as a friend that watched you. You did have that in the beginning, so that's good, and that's a plus, and that's something that you want to continue to enhance and do.
My self-care was just staying busy. Even if I just look back as a child now, I'm looking back and I'm taking a test. I'm like, okay, what was my self-care like? Because I didn't know what self-care was back
Right.
then. So, but
Right.
now you think back, what did I do? And a lot of it was just staying busy. I was in activities. I was just
Yep.
doing things, doing things, a lot to just help myself stay healthy mentally, but then without realizing it. And I do that as an adult as well.
And so that's that pattern that you created on your own. And that's that resiliency skill, being busy and being involved in activities. So having that access, the thankful part about it is that you had that access. Some other kids that even with the high score, because might not have access to activities and stuff, in their environment. So that's a good point. Good.
Very
Well,
good point.
Bobby.
Well, I can't say I had a 1 like Felicia. I
I'm an
can't say
overachiever. Yeah.
that. Yes, you are, but it's okay. It's okay. Um, so my H score was a 5. Took me a while to actually resonate with that, and I'll explain here in a second. Now, even though my H score was a 5, my resilience score was a 14. And even as an adult, these things still apply, which I know it could kind of seem weird if someone were to take it and say, well, if you had all these things happen to you, or you experienced these things as a child or, adolescent, whatever the case may be, how can you have these resilient things still happen in your childhood and at the same time still maintain them to this day? Um, I would say while taking the ACE, what I struggled with was things that may have happened that happened in my childhood, but didn't happen often, right? So, was there some verbal abuse? Yes. Did it happen often? That happened a good bit of the time. I would say maybe 60%, 70% of the time, right? Um, did I ever feel like I wasn't special? Yeah, I was even told that. So those things happen. Um, but then when you get to the resilience part, did your mother love you? Did your father love you? It kind of weighs on you when you have to answer it because it's either a definite or it's probably, right? And there were times where, I felt that my parents didn't love me. And whether it's because I failed something in school or I didn't achieve what they wanted me to achieve at home, whatever the case may be. And just being transparent, those things happen. So it's kind of now when I look back on it now, knowing that I don't have both my parents, even as an adult, I'm able to process it more and say, you know what? There were some underlying sacrifices that were made on my behalf that I wasn't aware of when I was a child. And because of that, it leans more toward a definite. But it doesn't negate from the fact that there were things that affected me as a youth that probably to this day, if there's some type of trigger that may have sparked that, are probably still lying dormant, right? Also, as an adult, I'm able to take all of these things as far as resilience and actually build on them. And now I pass them on to my family, right? So, as far as having someone to talk to and being a resource and being someone that's trusted, not only in my home, but also in my church and in the community, I'm taking those things by the horns and saying, okay, I can be what I didn't get, or I can be what I didn't have poured into my cup at the time because of that growth. And that all comes back full circle with mental health. What are you doing to find the answers that you need? Um, and if you're not searching for those answers, what has been put in place, whether it's by divine nature or someone just saying, "Hey, I'm going to help you with this." What has been put in place for you to actually, achieve your goals?
That's a great point, Bobby. And I think you want to think about it as a child's perspective because some of the things that we experience as a child, although if we viewpoint and look it back at it, I'm just thinking about a situation that I had when um I think it was in fourth grade, I got C's on my report card. Ooh, I started crying before my father came home, honey. I was like crying and crying. My dad came home, was like, "What you crying about?" I was like, "I gotta see. I'm gonna get a whooping." He was like, "No, C's are okay." And I was like, now I didn't cry for like 2 or 3 hours because of the resignation of I did something wrong in the penalty. And so when I talk about adverse childhood experience now, often or sometimes, no, I was a good kid. I didn't get disciplined all the time, but those times I did, that was an imprint, which was a needed in some instances it might have been needed, but it still had an effect on me as I processed and stuff, and it still affected me with mentally amongst other things. So, but I say that to say having those resiliency factors, building that strength to be able to process and talk through that. And then for my dad as a father, learning that, okay, I need to um, give my child some love here to show her that, you know, I'm not all harsh, and so those are things that, and when you talk about our family, historically, the Black family, with slavery and all of that trauma that we've experienced over the years, it could be kind of generational and from our environment. And back in the day, it might have been used as a way of protection. But and that's why when we try to get therapists that understands the cultural aspect of working with our individuals who are African American, because they understand the cultural aspects, then you don't see it as, how could you say, uh, diagnosed as a trauma in a sense. But looking at those resiliency factors and the fact that we had close knit families structure where here we are saying, hey, we have 14s, or we had 12s or whatever. We had those high scores to help us get through everything. Okay.
Hey, T or Bobby, can can one of you, or just, I know, can we, our listeners, I know we talk about our scores and we answer the questions. Can they hear just a few questions so they can understand if they ever go out and look, and these are some of the questions that we had to answer and that brought us to those scores. You don't have to read everything, but just to give them an idea, maybe.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know, Bobby, do you have it up? I don't have it up for me. Now
I haven't printed out yet. I have
this
mine
is
for you.
not the actual score that the actual ACE scale that was done for the study, but I think I can pull up some of the questions. So here are some of the questions. I think for number one, did a parent or adult or authority figure in the household often swear at you, insult you, or put you down, or humiliate you? Um, Here's another example. Did a parent or adult or authority figure in the household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Did you often feel, this is number four, did you often feel that you had enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or no one protected you? Did your parents or caregivers, did they drink or were they drunk or high when they took care of you? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Um, did anybody in your household go to prison? Was it any household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? And so those are some of the things that, were in the ACE questionnaire that we took. This wasn't like I know it's another ACE questionnaire, and we can put that on our links on our social media sites so you can look at those. And then for the resiliency questionnaire, is basically here are some of the questions. I believe that my father loved me when I was little. I believe that my mother loved me when I was little. When I was a child, neighbors or friends or parents seemed to like me. My family, neighbors, and friends talked often about making our lives better. As a youth, people noticed that I was capable and I could get things done. I was an independent and a go getter, and I believe that life was what you make it. So, those are some examples of some of the resiliency questionnaires. When we looked at that, we just looked at, okay, if you had some factors that were adverse, and then if you had some factors that were protective, did that kind of balance you out and, basically help you manage your mental health? And like I said, out of me, Bobby and Lisa had a pretty strong mental health, how could you say, regimen.
Balance. She had a
Yeah,
balance. Yeah.
balance. So she learned these factors early and were able to contribute it when, I still struggle. I'm gonna be honest with you. I did. I struggled when I was in older in high school and college. But, having seen this, it helps me to understand and accept where the struggles come from. And I think as an adult, keeping that in mind, it just helps you be able to manage your mental health um and your mental challenges in life, right now.
It's good that you mentioned that. Before I go into my example, because I want to use the grades example, like you used, with the ACE questionnaire, it's more of a yes or a no. Whereas with the resilience, it is a scale where you have definitely true, probably true, not sure, probably not true, and definitely not true. So the resilience questionnaire is more of a gauge. And from my personal experience with taking this, for some of these, I really had to sit back and actually reflect and think, okay, was the majority of my time spent as a child uh, gravitating toward this definite or these absolutes? And those are the ones I answered first because I wanted to make sure that if it's a definite, if it's something that's instilled even to this day in how I operate, I went ahead and answered those first. And the ones that I had a sliver of a doubt about, that's when I went back and I actually took some time to actually sit with those and say, okay, you know, did my mom and did my father love me? Now, obviously, you would say, yeah, because yeah, they provided for you, they did this, they did that. That's true, and yes, those are all facts. But also, no one can take from me the fact that in my moments that I needed my parents the most, they may not have been present, either physically or mentally in those particular things. And I had to find that somewhere else, or I had to lean more on my independence and say, okay, I got to figure this out. And with saying that, that actually goes into my example, such as Tanya had with the grades. With my family, it's A's and B's, nothing less. If
Right.
you brought anything under a B, you're getting the brakes beat off you.
Mhm.
Simple as that. You know. Now that could stem for a number of things. Obviously, environment played a role in it because we weren't in the best environment as far as the neighborhood goes, right? And so my mom wanted to make sure that we made it out the hood. But also, that's probably how she was raised. With my grandmother telling her, "Hey, you are the standard to get where you need to be. I want you to do what I wasn't able." So what did my mom do? She cascaded that down to her children and said, "Hey, we have a standard. This is the standard. You go below this standard, there are going to be consequences." So imagine me getting my first C, and yeah, it was in conduct. I get it, but but
Got you,
imagine
Bobby.
but imagine me getting my first C at a young age, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna get a whooping. I know I'm gonna get broke off. I understand that this is not gonna go well for me. And it happened exactly the way I figured it would happen. But after that, though, I was like, okay, I can't keep this type of conduct. I got to do something to get back on track. Either that, or I'm going to actually fall lower than what I'm going to fall, well, I'm going to be, and everything else is going to start. So,
Wow, C's. I mean, like C's were just wow. I mean, not saying wow, you got a C, but I mean, like
no
wow,
average. Hey,
C
look,
equals
no
C
average in my
equals the
household, man.
belt. That's what I'm
No,
like.
no, yeah.
Wow.
See, you getting something put on that backside. I guarantee.
It
You
was
lie.
so for me, it was just do your best. And my best was always what I did. And fortunately for me, my best was A's and B's and an occasional C, but I never ever had a fear of, oh wow, I got a C. If anything, the C was it was me saying, dang, I got a C. You know, that was me
Mhm.
kind of beating myself up with that. But I never had that from my mom because my mom mainly raised me. I'm an only child, but I never had that. But I also, at the same time, I was fortunate enough to have growing up teachers who pushed me and oh, you got to see that's okay. We're going to work on it. We're going to move. We're going to do what we need to do to help you get to the next level. Or a lot of that was just me wanting to do better. I never had that fear. So I was fortunate. And I hear the stories from you two that wasn't the case. Well, T, you got your dad was like, what you crying for? So that was kind of self inflicted for you, but something must have triggered. I don't want to say trigger, but something must have clicked in your mind to say, I gotta see that's going to equal this. So the trauma, the things that aren't truly, I guess the things that we conjure up in ourselves can kind of make things, our environments a little bit worse. And I'm no, by no means any doctor or anything. This is just me going off of what I hear and experienced in life because, growing up, even though I got these scores that look good on paper, because that's always what it was for me. It looked good on paper, but it's it looked good on paper, but I did have trauma, and
Yeah.
but none of the questions alluded to that trauma that I had. So had there been different questions, I definitely would have scored differently because growing up, I still experienced life. You know, my environment, I still experienced. I was a child of divorce. So I still experience, I know that's not the worst thing people can experience in life, but I experienced some other stuff that you know, still impacted me in a negative way. And as a result of that, I had bad behaviors as an adult, but it's just not reflected in this. So I say that to say, is this a true reflection? I mean, I'm not knocking
No,
the
I think
industry. I'm
this
just
is
saying,
just a screening to help you reflect. That's all it
Yeah,
okay,
is.
okay,
yeah,
I think people get screenings mixed up with diagnosis and assessments, and
correct.
this is
Yeah,
just a screening to
right,
help
okay.
you self reflect, just kind of what Bobby just did, self reflect and explore more. And as a therapist, when we give our screenings, that's all it is to give to self reflect, and then too what I want to go back to Bobby because I want to validate what he did in his reflection. Because sometimes when we're younger, we don't get the opportunity to validate what we're going through. And sometimes just reflecting back and saying to myself, wow, I felt that way as a child. And we might not have gotten that validation as a young person, but if we are older and we reflect back, it's almost healing in a sense to say, hey, this happened to me.
yeah,
You know, what had
yeah,
happened was this happened to me. And if nothing else, we can validate that for ourselves to our younger self because we didn't have nobody maybe back then to validate it for us.
yeah. It's a transparency that we never thought we needed, but we always needed it. And
Yeah.
thank goodness it happens when we're more mature and we're in a setting where we can actually not only process it, but actually be okay with accepting whether something is still not right or you know what, I was able to overcome that. And these are the factors that allow me.
And also giving ourselves some self honor and a pat on the back, like like we did that. I
Yeah,
think everybody needs that self validation to go to the next level, and that's just for their own mental health and well being and balance. But so sometimes when I do these things with my clients, it's like, okay, I want you to have the ability to self validate. To honor yourself and to say, hey, I got through that. Because that's a part of our recovery process.
Yeah, because when we were younger,
yeah,
You want to voice yourself and get some validation from an adult. That
You
wasn't
got,
happening.
girl, you gonna get a back slap.
Yeah,
Like what? What you say to me?
yeah.
I know.
Smell your upper lip. That's what we call it in the South.
You like my feelings hurt. I'm ready to. I want to cry. I want to get it out. You better shut up.
You
Give you
know.
something to cry for.
You know.
What was that? Who made that up? I'm gonna. You better
I
stop
don't
crying before I
know.
give you something to cry for.
I
Really?
don't know, but
You just
nine times
did
out of
it.
10, nine times out of 10, you gonna get something to cry for.
Right.
But
Tears
yeah,
not gonna stop.
kids never nowadays I hear parents trying to do that, and sometimes they swing it far to the left. But growing up in my generation, we never that was unheard of as far as in the household. Now you may have
Right.
teachers who wanted to do that and hear your voice and everything, but in the household, if you want an adult, you better move out that conversation and move on. I mean, my parents, my mom was nice, but she didn't play. It's like, no,
Right.
what? How old are you?
Right.
You ain't get no feelings validated. You better move.
Right. You working, you paying bills right here? So yeah. So before we go down that hole, 'cause that would be something that we could talk about for hours, right? Um, when we talk about different uh different things that we experience as far as uh, the types of diagnoses that we can get, there are some that we kind of pay attention to because they're the main ones, but then there are others that people kind of allow to go under the radar. So, Tanya, I know that you actually had something regarding like the 6 degrees of mental health. Can we get into some of those so we can kind of
Yeah.
talk about them?
So I had my co-host do this exercise called the 6 degrees of mental health challenges. And so what I wanted them to come up with is six mental health challenges or diagnoses that they've experienced in their own family. So I have my six, and then after we share our six, we're I can explain them a little bit, but after we share our six, then I want to talk about the degrees of separation. And y'all saw that movie 6 Degrees of Separation, right?
Uh-uh.
It's been a long time since I've seen it.
And
I've
so
heard
what
of it,
what
never
the
saw
whole
it.
preface is that everybody is 6 degrees related to each other. So I applied that to mental health challenges and diagnosis is that, okay, people will say, well, nobody in my family has a mental health illness or anything like that. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you might not have it or your family might not have it, but you might be 6 degrees away from somebody that has a mental health challenge or mental illness. So, um, and when I say mental health challenge, that's just a way of saying mental illness or whatever. So, with that, the diagnosis that we come up with our family, and I can start to share with mine. The six that I have in my family, and that includes myself, is anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, reactive attachment disorder, PTSD, and addiction. Those are the six that I have in my family. Um, so, um, would anybody else like to share the mental health illnesses or challenges that you have in your family? Or,
Well,
well, not family or friends or
yeah.
close friends?
So the ones that I'm aware of in my family are reactive attachment disorder, dementia, and schizophrenia. Those were the three that I was able to come up with. But I do know some of my friends have uh, PTSD, and that's something that they deal with. Some were in the military, some were not in the military. So, and of course, I have some that are anxiety, that have anxiety as well. I don't have any immediate family or secondary family that have anxiety to my knowledge. But when you look at certain traits and things of that nature, it could be a possible diagnosis.
I'll share. I don't mind sharing. Depression, bipolar, addiction, anxiety, schizophrenia, and PTSD. So,
So,
Okay.
So were y'all able to pick up, like, well, obviously, like the ones that y'all experienced closer to your families, like immediate family members or whatever the case may be, those are ones you probably were able to point out, I would assume, a lot quicker? Or was it the other way around, like first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, you were able to spot those way before you were able to discover the ones that were closer to you? How did that work out?
What do you mean? Like,
So like my one a member of my family, no, not my immediate family, but later on down the line has schizophrenia. And this particular person is very young. They're under the age of 21, right? Um, I was able to spot that with no issues. All right, well, the way that the symptoms are aligning with what I'm reading, this is what that is. So, did you all happen to pick up on someone else's um, diagnosis, or I guess think that, okay, that person may have what I'm thinking that they have. Um, and yet the person that you may be sleeping next to, or maybe yourself, you're kind of like saying, I don't have that. It's almost like a denial, so to speak.
I do that now that I know a lot more about it. I can pick up on stuff, even if it's my family, my immediate family, I can pick up on it because I've educated myself and I kind of look at some of the behaviors and what's going on. And I can kind of diagnose it. But some of it, no, you just think something's going on. And that's when you know something's going on, but you don't know what it is. And I'm not even diagnosed because that's not what I'm supposed to do. So, but but when you understand or see that that person is not acting like that person,
Uh-huh.
something is different. That just prompts me to go read and try to figure it out. But I just knew that something was different and wrong. What it was, not like you when you said, "Hey, because I read this, I can pick up on that," or I know that's what that person may be suffering from, or some of the symptoms of that. But no, it wasn't until I started educating myself that now I can like, okay.
I think in our family, we have mental health illness in our family. A lot of our family members struggle with bipolar disorder. And I think because of stigma, in our community, we might not call it that. Um, I think for some of my family members who are older, they would kind of share that this is what they had and that, look at yourself, you might be at risk for this. Um, because it was almost like a family secret, we kinda kept it in the family, and so when, one of the family my aunt was struggling with my cousin kinda stayed with me and my parents, and so he was struggling with suicidality, so for me and that screening, my cousin lived with me for about 6 or 7 months, and he was struggling with with suicidality, and it's almost like you think it's a geographical cure and you wanna kinda keep it in the family.
Yeah.
And at least that's what my family member thought, because it just got too much for my aunt and her husband to manage, so we figured let's let other extended family members help manage this, and that usually what happens, because, when you're dealing with mental illness that it becomes, um it does affect the family because 'cause you're trying to manage the symptoms and you care for the person and you don't want that person to die. And so, it's tough and it's hard and it's part of the family accepting and learning. And then too, my family was very religious, so we threw religion at it,
Mhm.
which is not good. And then some of the family gets educated and then they address it as it is. It's a mental illness. It's a challenge. And I think now with our generation, all of us kind of talk candidly about our mental health issues because all of us do have them. I have anxiety and depression. And, all of us are seeing therapists and we're all pretty maintaining. But, as cousins, we talk about our challenges and we talk about, yeah, the one cousin might not have it, but we know he might have something going on. All of us are dealing
Yeah.
with something
Yeah.
because it's hereditary. Mental illness is, and especially bipolar disorder is hereditary, and depression. So we acknowledge that, just like, for instance, every other disease like diabetes or heart disease. So it's like that. So you're more susceptible. So our family is more susceptible to that. And not to mention the addiction that's added to it, because we'll self-medicate in a minute instead of taking our medicine.
True. True.
So how
So
do you pass the shame? And because the family said, okay, this person, this is my child, this is whatever, and that they can't handle it, and then they pass it on to an aunt or a relative to help out. And that person, like you said, your cousin came to live with you. How does the family handle that? Because I know sometimes, growing up in the African American circle, it's like you don't talk about what's going on in the house. It stays in the
Yeah, it
no,
house.
don't
stays in the
talk,
house.
don't
That's
think,
right.
Exactly.
don't feel.
Keep it in the family. Definitely.
Exactly. Don't go telling the business outside the house. So how do you get past that shame? I mean, not that they're ashamed, but it's a shame. It is, I guess it is kind of considered a shame because you don't want nobody to know about it. You know?
I don't think we were looking at it as being shameful. We were looking at, we need to help him, and we're
Huh.
trying to do the best that we can. Um, we weren't ashamed of our cousin. We loved him dearly. We knew he was struggling.
But not
But
just shame, not shame of him, but just the shame that it's happening to our family. Not the shame of him, because yeah, you do love that person, you do love the individual, but it's still that. I guess
Like
that's
the
still the
why our
stigma.
family? Like
Yeah,
why our family? Why do we have to deal with such situations? Such as this.
I think we just didn't want to tell nobody. I
okay,
think
yeah.
I and it's funny because I remember when I finally accepted that I was struggling myself. I remember I was sharing it. I actually stood up and shared it in church. And my dad was like, "Don't tell nobody
Huh.
that." And
Is
I
that
was
because of
like,
shame? I'm not saying he didn't love you,
I,
but the
I
shame
think
of the
I think he didn't want people to judge me
okay,
differently.
okay.
And I kept quiet about it after that point because I said, if I can't share it, then I mean, I felt good because I was working on it. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yeah.
You feel good because you're like, okay, I'm working on it. I'm looking past this. And, at the church where you think that's a safe place to share,
Right.
um, he said, no, Tanya, that might not be a safe place to share because people will see you differently and maybe not want to be around you or whatever. And so it really kind of made me step back and go in and be like kind of like introverted with it. Like, okay, I can't trust everybody with this. So
Right.
I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's a shame. I just think I can't trust everybody with this.
But with
Okay.
older people in the older generation, though, it would appear that it is about how they will look at you, but it's also about how they will look at them. Because being that you were an adult and you were sharing this information, openly, which was a positive thing from an older generational person, they could say, okay, this person's carrying my last name. This person is my child. This person is representing me outside of our home, outside of our quarters. So to say that you have bipolar disorder or whatever the case may be, yes, it's bad for you, but people are going to start looking at me a certain way now. Not only because I allowed this to, I didn't take care of this while my child was young, but if I have any actions that correlate or correspond with what you may be going through, then they're gonna look at me funny now. And in the black community, they focus in on that. They lock in on that, be like, okay, if hypothetically speaking, if a person is they have behaviors that aren't aligning with normal behaviors. They would say, "Oh, that child's a little touch," right?
Have heard that.
But right. But who are they going to
Right.
look at? They're going to look at the parents. They're not going to look at the child. If the parents don't do anything to make the child appear normal, they're looking at the parents from that point moving on. And it's sad, but it's true.
Right. Definitely.
And so the moment that you had that's definitely a proud moment, you had to like kind of take it back when you shouldn't have. And that's very unfair. And I think that people that are older than us and the older generations don't realize the impact that that has on their children or the people that their guardians over. It has a significant impact because now how you process information, how you process your feelings, they're safeguarded now. So you're not opening up to anyone, and that spews over into different relationships that you may have in the future. And it's more difficult for people to actually experience the real you. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Unless
Yeah.
and that's only if you stop working. Thank goodness for you, you kept working. Even though you didn't share it a lot, you still kept working on you. And now you're where you are. So
Yeah. And so, like I said, it's a great point, but I think stigma plays a big thing in the African American community because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about mental illness. We don't talk about how it affects the family, whether it's shame or just being uncomfortable about admitting that we need help. Um, that's a big thing. And then it almost seem not to say it, but it could be considered a weakness for some people, and maybe that could be it. I know right now, statistically, African American males are at the highest suicide rates
yes.
for and it's increasing, and we don't want to talk about that, the trauma and the struggle for African American males. I know, Bobby, you was doing some research on that. I don't know if you wanted to share.
So I thank you. So I was looking at something and a couple years ago it was a study that showed that uh there was a significant increase in suicide attempts and suicides, particularly with young black males between the ages of 10 and 24. Even in 2024, it was stated that it was an increase of almost 60%. And so when you look at that, you look at the different stigmas that um, the African American community have to try to go through in order to get to that point. A part of it was what we discussed as far as keeping in the family. This person's like this. We're going to keep this close knit. We're going to keep it in house. We're not going to. I mean, people are going to eventually figure it out, but we got this under control. Another stigma is what they call spiritual bypassing. Just telling, hey, just pray about it, right? But not actually setting the person up to do the work while they're praying about it. That part's often left out. So it's like, okay, yeah, Jesus is a healer. Jesus is gonna cure you and everything's gonna that's fine. And that elevates your faith and that keeps your mind at ease. But when you wake up the next day and nothing's changed, and then those days turn into months and months turn into years because a person's not putting in the adequate amount of work, then to be better, then what?
Right.
Then you lose your faith and you're still at square one with the
Yeah.
same condition. So a lot of that it's meant for good, but sometimes it can have that negative turn. Another one I believe, of course, generational trauma. That's one. Great grandparents dealing with segregation and and slavery, things of that nature. They pass that on to their children, who happen to be our parents, right? So a lot of those things go from generational line to generational line. Um, Not trusting doctors because
Yep.
you have some people that will not go to doctors because they're afraid that they're going to get diagnosed with something that they don't.
And that speaks to the Tuskegee experiment, and
Yep, the syphilis
when we
experiment. Yeah.
and we don't have that as a people. We don't trust the medical establishment, and we tend to trust church more, and we'll lean more to that. And so that's why in my field I'm doing a lot of education with the churches and the faith-based organizations, because as African Americans, that's where we tend to go. And so it's important that they have the referral resources to be able to provide that assistance and that help, because sometimes they can make the wrong referral or not a referral,
Yes.
not at all, and then we lose somebody, and that's not good.
Yeah. And in addition to what you're talking about, and especially with black males, uh, and I can speak for myself. Growing up, we were always taught, not to show emotion. Your job is to work hard and make things happen. And being emotion, having that emotion was pretty much off the table, right? As far as how can I put it? Like being able to wear your feelings on your sleeves, like, oh no, don't cry. You're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to be strong. Even when you see someone transition, from life to death, it was the same thing. You should be strong for your family. That's the
Oh
stigma that
yeah, I've
was
heard
placed.
that.
Yeah, that's the stigma that was placed on me whenever I watched, my grandparents pass away. And other people pass away. You should be strong for your family, but no one is checking in on me. Like, how is this affecting me based on what I saw? How is that going to translate into my life's decisions moving forward? So, what do we do as men? We go silent, we implode, and we have to try to work these things out for ourselves. And that can lead, and all that suppression can lead to something that could end up being explosive, or it could lead to suicide because we factor in a lot of stuff, where we're living, right? Whether people are going to hear us out, whether we're going to be labeled the angry black man that's
Or
that's
angry
just
black
lashing out,
woman.
or angry black woman that's lashing out. Um, but we are in a situation where we don't have enough of us in those fields to actually relate to what we're going through, right? In addition to that, because of that stigma of being the angry person, and having that implicit, and other people having the implicit bias, meaning that it can be an unconscious bias where they say, oh, just because that person's yelling means that they're angry. I'm really not angry. I'm just expressing the only way I know how to be heard because in my household, I didn't have a voice. But now that I have a voice, I don't know how to regulate it to the point where you can actually understand what I'm saying and actually feel what I'm saying, right? So we can get to a place of help and transparency. So we have all of these stigmas that's happening within the black community and particularly with black males. And when they don't feel heard, they are going to act out. And even in today's society, it's a lot of black males that are just going with no guidance and they choose not to have guidance because they don't want to listen to anyone. But there are mentors, there are teachers, there are people out there that actually care. Um, and I think that that's something that once we start to get, once we get to a place where we really realize that we are our brother's keeper, and it does take a village to raise, the children to be strong individuals in society, that's when we're going to see the change happen. Right now, it seems like it's going back. You know,
That's a good point, Bobby. This is so much in this session. I'm just like, I think we're gonna have to do a part two, you guys. I really do. Because this is only, I think we're only just scratching the surface. But I think we shed some good light about this, and I think we're deserving of a part two to this to finish up. But Bobby, I think you had like a wonderful poem to share with the audience.
Can we, before you do that, can we share
yes,
some of the resources that we
Yeah,
found so our
absolutely.
listeners can have?
yeah.
Because I know for me, and people who know me, who are close to me, know that NAMI is one of my
Go-to
go-to
resources.
resources, the National
Okay,
Alliance on Mental Illness.
Nami's
And
good.
when my loved ones were going through their diagnosis, this saved my life.
Hmm.
This was a lifeline. So anybody who's struggling with that or find out that their loved ones or even themselves are struggling, this is an organization that can be helpful when you're out there alone and not understanding what's going on because they help you understand, they educate you as well, and they provide you with the resources. And you have support groups. So you
Yes.
can have that one-on-one support or that group support. And that group support was something that was helpful to me. So, and the other thing, and T, you probably can speak on this too, because and Bobby was talking about the Black men who have mental health issues and those diagnoses, and they're thought about being the angry Black man, and they're not. They have a mental health issue. The crisis intervention team, these are instead of calling the police on people who are going through these what do you episodes
Episodes.
episodes Is
Right.
that what they're called, episodes?
Mhm.
Because that's the first thing you want to do. He's angry, he's black, and he's out there, you know, tearing up stuff or getting in trouble. This person may be struggling with some mental illness, and if you understand it and start educating yourselves, the crisis intervention team called CIT, they're trained police officers who are trained in the area of mental health and know how to handle and deal with those who are struggling in that crisis state.
That's very important, Lisa, and that's a great point. We do have CIT officers trained all over the United States. If you know somebody that's struggling, you can always call 988, which is our suicide
Mhm.
and crisis line. Also, if you are texting and you want to just text, you can text 744-744. Those are our national lines to help someone who's struggling with those types of issues.
And another resource that has been on the rise that I've been seeing a lot of positive reviews for is Betterhelp. And Betterhelp does have a slate of a lot of therapists, right, that are tailored to what you need at that time. And I'm proud to say that a good bit of them are people of Black and African American heritage. So it's good for everyone to try to find someone that could not only just hear them out, but relate to them to some degree. And with BetterHelp, it's set up to where if that therapist is somebody that you may not need in this season, it's totally okay to switch at no cost. So it's like it's set up to where the objective is to get you where you need to be in life, no matter how many sessions it takes. So BetterHelp again, a good resource to check out and to make sure you get what you need. With that being said, I would like to share this particular poem. It was one that I came across, and it's by Akin Olusanya. And he actually did this for mental health awareness week back in 2018. So I wanted to read it, and it's called Men Speak Up. My soul is burdened. Seems like I'm in the dark, trapped, and my mind overwhelmed. A man with great pride, had all, lost all. Everything in me yelling for help. Remember growing up as a young male, the world telling me, always be strong. Now I'm down on life's luck. A man going on to 34 with no navigation to weather the storm. Lost. Strange, now I'm losing my sleep. No more appetite to eat. My once good health failing me. Anxiety, depression, bipolar personality disorder, schizophrenia. Come on, fellas. These are very real. My admonishment, therefore, is to men. Let's all speak up, rise, seek help, get counseling, embrace therapy. Know that mind cares. So, when I read this the first time, I had to go back and read it again because I was once in a place where I felt like everything I did didn't matter, right? And so I had to, learn how to be mindful of what I was saying and how I was operating. But at the same time, when you reflect and you take inventory over your life, it's kind of hard not to focus on the bad things that happen, right? And then you relate them to where you are now. I had to learn to count it all joy. But a part of that was to process the stuff that happened that was bad and how it turned out for my good because I'm still here, right? So it really doesn't matter how strong you are or how tough you are or how people perceive you. As men, when we go out in the world, we face a lot. And when we wear these capes and everything, we're everything to everybody. But when the doors close and we take off the mask and we take off the cape, we're left to deal with just us. So my admonishment to the men, and particularly black men, is to make sure that you take a look in the mirror. And that person that you see in the mirror, you let that person know that you are deserving of love, you are deserving of respect, and you are, above all else, deserving of help. processing what you're going through is so important because you can't edify others without edifying yourself.
Mhm.
So that's my message. And that's something, like I said, it's a daily challenge. I won't say struggle because struggles are going to be there, but it is a challenge to remain positive, even in the midst of everything that's going on around us. But again, I have to take a look in the mirror and say, hey, you are worth everything that's happening, and you are worth every ounce of help that you can get. And don't forget that. And that's me just pouring into myself, even in the midst of, thinking that no one else is pouring into me.
Aw, we're pouring into you, Bobby P.
I know, I know, I know, I
We're
know,
pouring into you.
and I'm very appreciative. And I think it just took me a long time to realize that I was being filled, and I don't know, I was just blind to it because I had that tunnel vision. Like, okay, I'm doing all this. At the end of the day, no one's gonna care because my job as a man is to do X, Y, Z. And my job is to not feel, and my job is to not show emotion. And like that became a regiment of myself. But now, whenever I express myself in a positive way, I get positive feedback, and that's good. I was always scared that wasn't going to happen because, there are some people that say, oh, that person's being, sassy or whatever the case may be because they're just doing something that is not in alignment with what society portrays. It's not, men don't, they're not supposed to show emotion.
Right.
They're not supposed to do X, Y, Z. But if done in a way where it's, it's expressive, but you're putting your stamp on it. It's like, hey, this is how I feel in this moment. These are my feelings, and I'm going to work this out. I'm going to work through this. I want you to be a part of that journey. If not, oh well, just like do you and I'll do me. That's where it really comes to light. And like I said, I struggled with that. Even with being in the church, even with doing this, even with raising the son, the same thing. I struggled with that, but now I'm in a really, really, really good place
Oh,
because
good,
I'm able to
Bob.
be real with myself. So
And it's that self care and that validation. So that's good, Bobby. Well, I guess we're at a close, Bobby. I don't know. I think this is one pretty good. We have to come back with a second part.
let's come back with part two because there's a lot for us to unpack. And
Yep.
I really appreciate all of your input, ladies. So for Belisa and Tanya, my name is Bobby. Thank you so much for joining us for your Point My View podcast, where our conversations are always great and honest and transparent. If you want to link in with us, we are on YouTube, and we also have other podcast platforms that you can get in alignment with. We hope to have jump on sessions in the future. So this will be coming back up, and we want to hear from you, the viewers and the listeners. So we'll be having some impromptu jump on sessions where we'll go live, and you'll be able to jump in and just share what you're going through and share your experiences. But remember, we are not doctors, Bobby and Valisa. But Tanya is licensed. But
I
Tanya
don't know.
is licensed.
Tanya ain't
So
free. No.
No,
An
she did.
appointment.
yeah, yeah. So put that disclaimer out there. But nevertheless, thank you so much. Again, your Point My View podcast. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Thank you so much. Again, your Point My View podcast. Thank you so much. Have a good one. And remember, protect your peace.